So on we go and on we build with our knowledge of effects controls. And just as I mentioned in the previous section, this is where we're going to be learning not only about picture-in-picture, but we're going to be picking up other things along the way. And one of those things that we're going to be touching on is color matte. What is a color matte? Well, what it is, quite simply, is a blank piece of color in your video. We will get to that in a section, but I just want you to have that in mind. A color matte, M-A-T-T-E. So what we want to do here is I want to use what we've built on, or what we've learned in the previous section, and build on that. So that's the effects controls within here for any particular clip. Now, just to make it clear, I've got this selected, this clip selected, so these are the effects controls for this clip. Now if I select this, even if I don't bring the playhead over, if I select this, watch up here, all those values have changed, because what we were changing around here is not affecting this. It's a different clip. So let's bear that in mind. What we're also going to be talking about in here is nesting, and the reason for nesting, and well, firstly what it is, but also why you would need to. So you're probably fully aware of the term picture-in-picture. It's a picture within a picture, and sometimes you may want to do that to be able to show more than one thing on screen at the same time. A number of YouTube channels do it where they have the person who's talking down here and they're reacting to a video which takes up all of this. Their picture is within the picture. What we're going to use it for in this sequence is to show two stages of these wood pellets going into the pizza oven and lighting it at the same time. Often it's used to speed up the message that's being brought across. Maybe you're limited to a 30-second or a minute long video on social media. That's where picture-in-picture can come in really handily. So I don't want to affect these at the moment, and you may be getting bored of viewing these two clips, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to change as little as possible with regards to the footage that we're using right now, so then you can focus on what we're actually doing to the footage rather than the footage. That makes sense? I hope it does. So I'm going to make a duplicate of this. So anywhere here, just with the main pointer tool, the selection tool, which is shortcut V, and we select by just clicking and dragging what's called a marquee, an M-A-R-Q-U-E, maybe another E, not too sure, a marquee around it, very much like you would do in a number of other creative programs. But we draw a marquee over, and you can see that both these clips are selected. Click out and they are deselected. So what we're going to do is we're going to select those both, and then we're going to hold down Alt or Option on a Mac and drag. All of a sudden we have another copy. Let go of the mouse and then let go of A, and we now have two copies of, or one copy each of these two. We can easily move that around just as we would. We can split it, and as you see, it doesn't affect this at all. This, for all intents and purposes, these are two new clips that are completely independent of these. Just to be clear, if I Control Z a few times, we didn't have to drag up initially. We just drag away and let go, and there we are. There are two clips. So these are the two that we're going to be playing with right now. So if I get my mouse head or my playhead over, and here is the first clip that we're going to be playing with. Now I'm going to delete this transition by zooming in and selecting it. See how that's just selected? Up in effects controls, now that we've got effects controls here, you can actually do a number of things with regards to a number of transitions, but we're not going to touch on that for now. This is selected. I'm just going to press delete, and that has now removed that transition, so it just goes one clip into the other. So what we want to do now is we want to scale down these clips to be able to have them both in the same picture, so picture-in-picture. But do we really want to scale both down, or do we want to scale just one down? Well, let me give you a for instance. Remember, it's the top-down setup within a sequence, so anything that's the highest is seen. If I drag this clip over there, we now have this clip rather than this clip. So what I want to do is I want to place this picture first. We're going to change this, but paste this picture in this picture. How do I do that? Well, quite simply, we go back up to the effects control panel with our clip selected, and let's start scaling it down a little. You see how they're now both on screen in our program monitor. If I go back to the beginning and play, you can see that both clips are playing at the same time on the same screen. Now what I want to do is I want to move that down to the bottom right. Now, of course, now I've scaled it down, I can always move it around and move it down here, or I can click on motion and drag it down to the bottom right. But what else could I do? Think about what we just touched on the previous section. Let me, rather than Control and Z, don't forget you can completely reset the parameters. Remember this? This is our anchor point, and remember, it's visible because we've clicked on motion. So we're going to grab this, and remember, we all learned it's Control, holding down Control, and we can snap it right down to here. And then we can just scale down, and rather than scaling down in the middle, which is what happened at first, we're scaling down to the side. You see how learning that little thing with regards to the anchor point can really speed up what you're trying to achieve. So now if we play these both side by side, we've got picture in picture. Now let's say we wanted them both on the same screen but both the same size. Well, that runs into a problem that we've got, and let me explain why. Let's just reset that and move that out of the way for now, because if we did the same and scaled down, remember, we've already affected this. So if we scale down now, all of a sudden, we're scaling down from a different anchor point, but also we've got this in here, which is what we had in before. Now we could crop it, but we're not getting there yet. So let's make a different decision. What I'm going to do is I'm going to nest this clip. Now what nesting does is it creates an outer clip with this clip inside. Simply, for all intents and purposes within this sequence, we are baking in those details, those changes, these parameters. And the way in which we do this is you select and press N. Now, I can't remember if that's my own keyboard shortcut. You would right click and select nest here, but let's just double check our keyboard shortcuts. Remember, we played with these in the past. So N is nest. See how it's there? If yours isn't there and you need to set it, you'll just go simply to this little search bar here, write nest, and in this shortcut there won't be anything there. All you do is click in here, that opens a little bit of a dialog box, and press the letter N and then press OK. That's the shortcut for nesting. So let's nest this. Now it always comes up with the default. If you've got more than one sequence that's already nested, it will continue to number. Sometimes it just comes up with any number. Obviously I went to nest before, so the actual program thinks that was number 1, so it's now trying to tell me this is number 2. I'm going to rename this. It's already ready to be editable or edited even, so I'm going to just put wood pellets, and if I press OK, that now has created a nested sequence up here. You don't really have to worry about this, but I like to keep this tidy, and sadly this is something that you have to do manually. So in an empty space, if you don't have empty space, you would just click here for a new bin. I always just right click and new bin, and I'm going to title this again just like the nest. We have an editable text right away. I'm just going to write nests and press enter. And I'm going to drag this into here. Just like File Explorer or Finder, it's now nicely nestled in the nest bin. So what does that mean? Well, now we've nested, as you can see, all these are now back to 100%, 960, 540. This is reset. That's because it's baked in what we want into this file. But that doesn't mean it can't be then edited. We've only had one sequence along this along this area, one timeline sequence within this area before. But if we double click this, it's now opened another sequence, but a sequence that's only got one video and one audio channel. It has to have an audio channel. It just default, there's an audio channel in there. But in this nest, which is effectively its own timeline, we have all the details within the effects control for this clip. Does that make sense? The reason why we've done this is because we want to keep that framing, that composition, which is different from the original composition. And the reason why we want to do this is because we're now going to affect this as if it was a standalone set clip without having to then crop anywhere. We've effectively cropped in, because if we now start to grow down or scale down, there's not this here. You see how I've just affected that? If I now go back to where that nested clip is in and I reset, it's all offset, because within the nested clip, which is now here, it's offset. I hope that makes sense. Let me Control and Z. Let me undo that just so we're back to where we wanted our nested clip. And I'm going to reset this and reset this so we're back. The reason why we're doing this is because we now want to do picture in picture with this other clip. Now I know that doesn't necessarily seem like it's any different, but I assure you it is. And if you come back to this at some point during your learning of Premiere Pro, you'll know how different it is. So what we want to do is we want to have this clip and this clip at the same time. What did I do then just to be able to look underneath? I enabled and disabled this clip. I've set this to 0 on my keyboard. And as you see, when I toggle, it almost grays out this clip. I use this all the time just to have a quick look below and see what is below to make sure I know where I'm at. You can easily turn it off with the little output toggle track output here that closes the eye so you can see it, but that affects the whole track, and I've left that closed a number of times on renders and had to go back. So I just like to enable and disable the track. Again, if yours doesn't do that, keyboard shortcuts down here, type enable, and the actual default is Shift E. I just have it as 0. I have a number. If you don't have a keyboard with a number pad, you should get one. It's just so much easier with anything that you're doing. As you can see, the only shortcut that I have set for my number pad is the 0. But if you imagine, if you're trying to dial in numbers here, it's much easier to do it with a number pad than it is to use the numbers across the top of your keyboard. It's just easier. If you're on a laptop and there is not one, you can always get a little USB number pad to the side. I used to have one of those when I used to edit solely on a laptop, and it just made the world of difference. So let's get some picture in picture going on here. We've got the fire starting on this one, so we're going to want this to the right, I think, and we're not going to have it scaled down. I want them both the same size. So let's reset that anchor point first, and let's reset everything. You see how that's now pushed down to the bottom? That's because everything has changed because my anchor point was a different place. Resetting the position has brought that back up, and if I click on motion, the anchor point is right in the middle. If you ever have a problem and things aren't working out right, and you're as sure as anything that you're doing it right, always check your anchor point is 960 540 if you're working in 1080. It will be slightly different if you're working in a different resolution, but anchor point is always the first place I go to. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag this over to the side a little bit, and it doesn't really give us much room for the other clip, and I want a little bit of a hand in. So I'm going to click the bottom clip and I'm going to drag him the other way. See how we're showing in there? Let's bring on the safe margin so we know exactly where center is. Okay, that's not really going to work for me because I'd like to have a bit more. It may work. That looks quite a tall image actually, how it's working out once it's behind. But I could also do with a little bit more here. Let's just see how this plays and see how it looks. That looks quite good, but I've got a lot of space here and it's not really working for me. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to add a crop effect into this sequence to be able to bring this more here. Because you see, if this being the top clip, if I dragged it more over, yeah, okay, we'd see more of the clip behind, but we're seeing less of the clip that we want. So what I'm going to do is let's keep the safe margins on again. So I've got an easy eyeball on where the center is, and I'm going to go to the effects panel. Again, if you don't have this, window and effects will bring up this effects panel, and you can deep dive and twirl down. Remember these little twirl things? You can twirl all of these. I may have more than you because I have a number of plugins and things like that, but you can twirl down in all of these. I hate doing that. Thankfully, we have a search bar. So I'm just going to click in here and type crop. And that gives me the crop effect within the transform area of video effects. That's exactly what we want. So I'm going to grab this crop and I'm going to drag it on this clip. See what just happened there? Let me just undo and show you again. Watching the effects panel, effects control panel even, that adds all parameters for a crop. Brilliant. What we could have done, Control Z, is actually with this clip highlighted and the effects control panel shown there, we could just drag it into there. But it's best practice to drag it onto the clip that you're wanting to manipulate, just to make sure you're dragging it on the right clip. The amount of times that I've dragged it into here and something else was like say this clip back here was highlighted, and then I'm going back and forth with a crop and it's like, why isn't it not doing anything? And then I ignore it and go back here and all of a sudden this clip is completely cropped over here. So that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to do it with this clip. So this clip is highlighted, we've got our crop effect in here, and then it's just as simple as dragging these numbers to crop where you want it. So left will be the left, top, top, right, right, and bottom, bottom. What I'm going to do is I'm going to twirl this down, just like you've done with the scale. I like to twirl it down because I'd like to really fine tune. Look at that. So we're cropping into the clip. There's no zooming in, there's no scaling up, there's no movement. It's just a crop. And because I've gone straight on the safe margins here, or if I used my ruler / guides, by the way, if your ruler / guides aren't showing, window and show guides. It's not in window, it's in view. It's one of the only things that isn't in window, but just to make sure that you can see your guides here. There is rulers here as well, but yeah. So we can see that this is set to exactly where we want, right in the middle. So now if we play this back, you've got two elements being shown at the same time. That is picture in picture, and it works so very well. We're going to build on this at some point, and that is to be able to manipulate the crop and manipulate the motion and actually be able to move these things around while they're playing. That's a little bit later on. I want to cover a few other things first, but that is really where we can just make amazing things. If you haven't already got it yet, you can make amazing things in this program. It's fascinating. I absolutely love it. But before we finish off with the picture in picture, what I want to do is I want to give you another version of what we could do with the picture in picture, building on what we first did. So let me just undo everything. And remember how we set the anchor point to the bottom here and scaled down? Well, what I want to do first is I want to crop it. In fact, I'm going to scale it down and then crop to include just what we want. Just to show you, it's probably not going to look better than what we had it before, but let's just click on the anchor point. Let me hold down Control, drag it down to the bottom, and then I'm going to scale it down just to about here. Now, the reason why I'm stopping here is because I don't necessarily need like this part. Okay, it's my father-in-law and he'll probably take offense, but you know, I'm willing to run the risk. So we actually only want about here. So let's move over to the side. You don't always have to crop. You can just move him to the side, because it's then going off, so it won't be used. But now in hindsight, maybe we should have it the other way around. Maybe we should have fire being the big bit rather than the pellets being poured in. So let's Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, get it all the way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the wood pellets onto the top. I'm going to select them both within the marquee tool and just bring them down just for cleanliness. And I'm actually, rather than scaling down to the bottom right, I'm going to scale down to the top left. Just tell the story going from left to right. So let's have the nest. This is the nest now selected, and click on the anchor point, and let's drag this up to the top left. Snap it into place there, and then we're going to twirl down and scale down from the top left. I'm happy with that. And now we're going to move this over so we can see it better. Oh, but hold on, we've now got black behind. Remember what I mentioned about the color matte? That's when this is going to come into place. But let's finesse this exactly how we want it first. So let's bring the wood pellets. Again, this is all eyeballing, so we're kind of deciding where we want it and playing around. Nothing is destructive. It's completely non-destructive, so everything can be undone. So this is here, that's fine, but this isn't where I want it to be. In all honesty, I'd like it the other way around. I really would. I'd like him to be this side, and because we've got no text or anything on screen, it might not really be a problem if we've got this reversed. So let's do that. How do we do that? Well, there's a couple of ways, but the easiest way is to add an effect, and the effect we're looking for is flip. And obviously we don't want a vertical flip. If we dragged a vertical flip, remember how we dragged on the crop and nothing had changed? We then had to manipulate it. Well, these have the manipulation built into them. Vertical flip, if I drag this on the bottom clip, which is the big clip in the actual program monitor, we're upside down. Vertical, we flip around the vertical. Control Z, get rid of that, and we're going to put on the horizontal flip. So now all of a sudden, you see what I mean? It makes sense. If I mute that effect, we've got a lot of dead space here, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work as well for my eye. So let's turn back on that horizontal flip. That looks good for me. I may want to tweak him over just a little more, and actually with that in mind, we could then zoom up or scale up this a little bit more. And because we're still with the anchor point at the top left, it's working really well because it's zooming, scaling. I need to stop saying that. It's scaling up from where I want it to. Now, if I click on motion, I can just finesse that where I want it. And okay, I'm happy with that. What I actually think is that I want to crop a little bit at the bottom. We're going to get rid of this black, but just for now, I want to crop in a little bit from the bottom here. So let's go back to our effects list and type in crop once more. And we're going to drag this onto the bottom clip. So right here, and then we're going to twirl down the bottom, crop percentage, and just bring it up just a little bit. Yeah. Now actually I want to bring everything down a little bit, just so we got some space kind of all around. So I'm going to highlight that bottom clip and bring him down a little bit. Maybe bring him in a little bit. Okay, we've got loads there. And I kind of want some space. If we're going to have some space, for my eye, I kind of want some space all the way around. So let's put that exactly where we want it. And then we already have the crop effect applied. And then we're just going to slowly slide up that right crop. Yeah, that makes sense for me. I'm going to just reposition that just a little bit more. I like that. I'm happy with that. Let's just play them both. That looks good. Good, I'm happy with that. So we don't want black around the outside. I'm not happy with that. It doesn't really look that good. I want white. How do we do that? Well, what we need is a color matte. So again, not in the effects, because you can't create anything in the effects. You can only add bins in here. And because it's kind of footage, it needs to be within the project area. So if we right click, remember we hit new bin before and we were down here and you could create a new bin here. Well, just to the side, you've got new item. Or again, right click and new item. You get the same selection regardless of whether you hit right click or you go to the bottom. And what we want is we want a color matte. So just click that. And now what we're doing is we're confirming the settings for this color matte. And what it will always default as is the settings of the sequence that you're working on. I've never had to tweak this, so I always just go straight through and hit OK. Now what we're doing is we're selecting the color that we want. And I said I wanted white, but actually I want a slight off-white. So you see how this automatically has a little circle. You can only see a quarter of it up in the top left. That's black. That's, if you ever watched Father Ted, that's priest black. That's proper black. And this right down the bottom corner is proper white. We're selected within the RGB scale, and we're up in the red area right now. So you could select literally any color that you wanted. Say you wanted a green, click into here, and then you've got all these different types of green throughout the color space. Also, if you have a hex code is a series of numbers and letters which identify an actual color. You could just dial that in there if you're working for brand colors. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, you see how I can drag around and this box is changing color. I'm just going to drag around. It doesn't really matter what color you've got when you go far enough to the left, because you've literally just got the gradient from black all the way through to white. And I'm going to have it maybe just a very light gray. So that's what I'm going to select. I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to press OK. And it gives you now the option to choose the name. I can be quite lazy and I just hit OK. In After Effects, it literally puts in a name there for you. So it would actually put light grey or dark blue, but it's really quite clever. I'm surprised that Premiere Pro haven't updated that yet. Maybe if you're watching in the future, they have finally got around to updating that. I'm not too sure. But this is text that's ready to be edited. So I'm just going to type in light grey. If you're not in the UK, or if you're in the US, that grey may be a typo for you. I assure you in the UK it isn't. Let's not get into that. And just press OK. And as you can see, the light grey is now here, ready to be dragged in like a clip. So let's do that. Drag it in, drop it on the timeline, and okay, we're covering everything. Now we want this to be on for the duration of these two clips. So just like anything, we drag it out. This is unlimited, by the way. You can drag it out to be as short or as long as you want. It can be from 1 frame to 17 million hours if you really wanted to. But we're going to drag this to the end of these two clips. But remember, we're top down. We are always top down with our Premiere Pro sequences. So what's at the top is being seen above anything else. So we need to get this below the two. And to do this, you just simply marquee and select these two and then just drag them up and above. If you want to make sure you don't deviate up and down the sequence, you can hold down Shift, and then I can't drag it anywhere other than vertically within this sequence. So I'm going to drag them above the light grey and let go of my mouse button, and all of a sudden we now have grey behind, which I'm sure you'll agree is much prettier than just black. We can go one step further, and we will, and I'll show you this now. I'm just going to bring these down. So I've selected them all now. I'm going to drag down, and I'm going to hold down Shift just to make sure it doesn't deviate from where we're at. Now, to give this just that little bit next level, we've got a picture on a picture. It is picture in picture, but it's more picture on a picture, and it's cutting within. And we've kind of created a space with the light grey color mat behind. So what I want to do is I want to give some kind of depth of feel, not depth of field, which is a term in photography and videography, but a depth of feel. So a feeling of not necessarily 3D, but just more than just a flat design like this. And the way in which we do that is we go to Effects, and we're going to search for a drop shadow. There's our drop shadow, and we're going to grab this drop shadow, and let's just drag it on the first one for now. And as you may or may not be able to see, let's tilde that, you've got a slight shadow on the edge here. Now, this has also added drop shadow within the effects controls of this clip, which is actually a nest. And what I always do, and you don't have to, but you can select a different color of shadow if you wish. I mean, you can even make the shadow red if you wanted. See how the red comes around here? You may want to do that. You may not want to, depending on the effect that you're going for. But the opacity always defaults at 50. Now, first and foremost, I always take that to 100. What you're left with initially is just a black line all the way around. Now, that might be enough for you. But what I then will do is I will increase the distance from the subject. Never that much. We've gone to what? Distance is 15.2. It depends again on the size and resolution of the clip that you're using. Sometimes I only have to take it to like 5, distance of 5. The direction is the direction the light would be shining, depending to create your shadow. I always like my drop shadow to be bottom right. I'm not too sure why. But then the big thing is the softness. So what this will do is this will blur. No, it won't blur. It kind of, well, it softens it. It kind of just smudges it out, but in a uniform way. So if I drop this down, obviously remember you can just drag up and down with the numbers, but I like sliders. And if we increase that, you see how that's changed that? You see how nice that is? That's just a nice little soft, just a lovely little touch. And it, because this clip is on top of this clip, it does actually put a little bit of the shadow of the clip onto the clip below. Now I want to do the same with the clip below. Now I could easily do that by dragging on and making a note of everything that I've done, and then doing it to this clip. But the easier way, not the easiest, but the easier way is to select the drop shadow, Control and C to copy, and then click the pizza oven, which is the next one down, scroll down to an empty space, click in and Control and V. That then places that right here. So we now have that exact same drop shadow on both clips. There is, however, an easier way. Let me Control Z. So we've taken that drop shadow off. And we're going to make use of a keyboard shortcut that I told you to do very early on, and that is paste attributes. Let me just double check in case you hadn't done it. But if we search in keyboard shortcuts for paste, we have paste attributes here. The default shortcut is Control Alt V. That's three, literally three keys. I just have it as P. I set it as P, and this is why. Because this is such a powerful tool, I use it all the time. So, which is the clip that we've got the drop shadow on? That's this one, which is this one. And you can see the drop shadow is right there. So with this selected, I'm just simply going to Control and C, copy to the clipboard that clip. Now I'm going to select this clip, and rather than, I can't Control V into here because I've selected the clip and I've copied that. If I copy, it's just going to give me another instance of that whole clip. Don't want that. I've got this bottom clip selected, and instead of Control V, I'm clicking P. P is paste attributes. So just like you can copy and paste the motion settings and all that, everything, and the more effects and tweaking that you do of a clip, the more things will actually be available here to paste. What I have here is drop shadow. So I'm going to uncheck the motion because I don't want to paste the attributes of the motion. All I want to do is paste the attributes of the drop shadow. Hit OK, and we have our drop shadow, and it's now in the effects controls. Now that might seem an extra way of shortcutting that you don't necessarily need, but if you have 3 or 4 different things that are placed on a clip, maybe you've done a color grade and maybe you've done some movement and you just want to copy all of that and replicate it on another clip, paste attributes will save you so much time. So now we have our picture on a picture, which is kind of picture in picture, and we have a color mat behind it, and we have a lovely drop shadow adding just this lovely little, I love a drop shadow. It just gives that little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-render this. So I'm going to get to the beginning and I'm going to press I on my keyboard. Remember how we used to do it in the source monitor? And let me go to our videos, and we selected I and O for in and out. Well, within the actual timeline, we can select I here, and we can press down one, if we get actually in here again, and press down, that goes to the end of the clip, and we're going to press O. And then we're going to press enter. That does nothing. That's because there are no effects to pre-render. You see how this is yellow? Yellow means it's not pre-rendered. Red means it needs a render, and green means it's pre-rendered and ready for full playback. You don't have to, but I always do, especially when I've applied an effect, just to make sure that I'm seeing it exactly how it would come out. So I hold down Control and hit enter, and this runs a full rendering of that. You see how that's now changed from yellow to green? I'm then going to right click and clear in and out because it just annoys me. But if we now hit tilde to come big screen, or full screen even, and hit play, perfect. So we've been able to see it in the full resolution how we want it. And as I said before, quite often you need to do this because you're held for time and you need to tell the story and more steps than you have time for. And being able to do a picture in picture like this can not only save time, but can look really nice with the storytelling that you're doing.